Welcome back, everyone. We are so delighted to have another live community event. Today, our focus is going to be on flower essences for children. And our wonderful teacher, Ruth Toledo Altschuler, is going to be leading this conversation with a lot of her experience. And this was really this topic was spurred by an experience she had. We'll get into that in a second. First, I want to just encourage everyone to feel free to, if you have a question or a comment or an experience or anything along those lines, these conversations are better when you're involved. So we want to hear from you. So if you are interested, go ahead and go to the reactions button. Raise your hand and we'll bring you in. We want to hear from you. And if you are too shy to do that or don't want to, go ahead and put something in the chat and I can either read that out if you don't want to, and we can get a conversation going here. So welcome, Ruth. It's good to be here. Welcome, everyone.
Yes, welcome everyone. And it's great to be sharing about this topic that is so dear to my heart and to the heart of so many people who are working with flower essences and flower essence therapy, because it has to do with healing in the present and supporting those who are taking us into the future as well. And it's just so good that more and more kids will be able to have access to the flower essences. So thank you all who are interested and engaged and wanting to be giving the flower essences to children. So what inspired me to call this theme and even to call for perhaps a bigger and longer conversation on this theme of working with children is the fact that I was just attending to a conference in Brazil on the four stages, the four levels of response of flower essence therapy. Was organized by the company that I co-founded in 1991 and left, a number of years ago. But it's, still a lot of the people who are there and a lot of the speakers are people that I've seen starting their flower essence careers. And one of the things that I realized in watching this event is how mature flower essence therapy is in Brazil, how much of a body of work and experience already exists that is distilling into beautiful offerings and teaching by many of these speakers. Richard Katz was pointing out the fact that during the time of Dr. Ba, he only had the opportunity due to his short life and also to the beginning of that experience of flower essence therapy. They never went really much further than the first R, the first level of response. And there was no record in the literature, there is no record in the literature of the deeper levels that flower essence therapy does reach and the greater repercussion that has throughout people's lives. And so I was especially inspired by meeting yet again my colleague Olympia Jimenez, who is a flower essence practitioner in Brazil, who started around the same time as me. We were colleagues and kind of pioneers in the field. And she became highly specialized in working with children. And she has, and I actually have to confess, I've never physically been to her office, but it's almost as if I had. She has this space that has all kinds of toys and things that children engage with. And she works in a way that children really participate actually in the selection of the essences. And she has the box of essences in ways that children will play around with them and actually direct her to specific essences that turn out to be the ones that they're going to need and that they're going to be taking. So there's all this engagement of the kids with, of course, this whole environment that she creates, but also with the actual essences and this whole connection that they make with the essences, sometimes also with the flower card, but very much with those bottles. And amongst other things in her talk, she was telling that now she is getting in her practice the clients that she worked with as children 30 something years ago, bringing in their kids. So it's this intergenerational resonance of the work with flower essences blossoming. And this has happened to me as well. And it's something that is just so gratifying for us to see. And so, you know, one of the things that I wanted to share in this is really that this whole interactive way of working with the kids is such a special way if you work in person. Um, and you can be very spontaneous and creative around it. My friend Olympia, one of the things that she has learned with Bram Zalberg, that was one of our teachers, the Dutch creator of the Blossom Remedies, was to use her hands on the boxes and the bottles and to feel a little something in certain essences that will turn out to be the ones selected. And sometimes I think she teaches the kids to do that. And the other thing that I wanted to share with you is that, if you don't already know that, is that kids think it's totally natural that there is an essence for this, there's an essence for that, and there's an essence. I mean, they don't wonder, really? There's a remedy for that. They just assume that, of course, there is. This is the way it should be. There's no doubt. And then they start asking, oh, and would you have one for this? And would you have one for that? Of course, you know, there are many specifics around working with essences with kids. Sometimes, especially adolescents, we have these kids that won't really say much, you know, and you ask a question and then they would say no or yes. And then you don't really know how to guess. And of course, the intuitive methods using a pendulum that suggests certain essences and you can ask questions and check, or using the flower cards are always wonderful ways to get the conversation started.
I could add a piece on that
Please do.
specific topic.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I do, my practice is entirely remotely. And this was a young man, I don't know, maybe 12 or 13, of an age where I didn't just want to speak to his mother, where I ideally wanted to get a little input from him. And it was that, you know, total monosyllabic answering. uh-huh, yeah, that's all I could get. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. I wonder what I can, you know, how can I, you know, get a little more engagement from him? And I finally came up with a question of, you know, what's your favorite tree? Ah, willow. Then he told me this whole story about this tree, and he liked climbing in it, and he had this connection to it. And I said, great, you know, and then I could tell him a little bit about the willow and how it could help him based on, you know, what he's going through. And then he was completely on board. But, you know, it's like you just kind of have to find where that opening might emerge for you. And, you know, a kid is usually going to be able to tell you what their favorite tree or favorite plant or, you know, whatever age they are. So
Absolutely. And also ask them to draw, you know, and draw the situation, or draw, you know, what you want me to help you with, or draw yourself, you know, or draw a flower or draw a tree, you know, and you will get a lot, I'm sure. Others may have a lot to contribute on that. Deborah probably as well, just how much, including drawing and some art expression is going to be a wonderful way of engaging with the kids and of watching the results and the evolution as they take the essences and come back, and how the drawings show up that show the very clear results.
Yeah, bring integrating some level of art therapy, I think, is a very incredible way of being able to track where they might be. Deborah, if you're really welcome to come on in. We'd love to have your input if you feel like it.
You're muted still, Deborah.
I have a company called Flora Corona, and all my bottles are transparent, and they have there's color elixirs, there's flower, and there's gem. So I made those in particular because at a certain point I gave all my clients just photos, including the children. So of course the children could pick exactly what, of all the essences I had, they could pick exactly what they wanted. And when the bottles came out of my repertoire that are transparent with photos on them, they just know exactly what they need. But I also did all of that too. I had a sand tray, I had a marionette, I had painting. I've done all those things with children as well. And what I noticed with the kids is that the little kids is that they sort of needed specific frequencies. And of course, I always worked with the families as well, because if a mother saw the child get well and the mother had the problems, then it wouldn't work. So I always worked with the mother or the father so the children would know that when they get well, the parents are feeling those emotions and won't stop the progress. So I think that's really important. And Ruth, you mentioned that too. You always work with one of the parents and the children until, as you said, Kathleen, when they get to be 12 and they don't want the parent to come again, then they're old enough and they can do that themselves. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we had a few questions that I think may be a good starter for other questions and comments and contributions that may come from all of you who are here. Um, so, um, one question was in relation to well, perhaps I'll say something before that. There are some generics that we highly recommend because sometimes you really want to have something at hand in a situation, or just give advice to a friend or to, someone in the family. And so the kindergarten combination by FES is a generic that contains some flowers that are always in use when we're working with kids, like chamomile, which is calming and soothing, angelica for this feeling of protection and connection, pink yarrow for not absorbing the charges and emotions of others around, mariposa lily for feeling nurtured, buttercup for feeling special, and feeling you are this little light that shines, and that you're really important and valuable as a being, and a few others. So this generic formula is one you can rely upon in many situations. And just recently, for instance, I took that formula when I went visiting my grandchild. Um, and she was in a transition in which she was going to go through sleep training, a major thing. And I also took the walnut flower essence. I added the walnut into the kindergarten. And this whole situation of having to be put to bed without going on the breast and doing all that transition of soothing herself on her own, this combination was just so supportive. And she did it, in a few days. She really transitioned beautifully to accepting, okay, now it's time to go to bed, and you're not going to have the breast always to soothe you, and you can sleep on your own. So there are other three combinations that I do want to mention because they are really like the go-to generics with children. Maybe Kathleen wants to talk about calling all angels because Jane was such a fan of using call. It was created from her work with children, right?
Yes. Um, uh, Originating essences with the Alaskan essences in Alaska. What she described was, when you have seasons that the day length just extends and extends and extends and extends, it's very hard to get children to go to sleep. It's very, all the systems become dysregulated just because of these, wild swings. And she described how, one of the purposes or one of the originating aspects on calling all angels was to help those kids get to sleep, just to calm down, settle down, and be able to sleep, and that they would be kind of stimulated all the time by all the daylight. And so using calling all angels, particularly the spray version, I think is especially what she's used a lot with the kids. But because they have that ability to use the spray, and however old they are, whether they can do it themselves and spray their room, and what she described was getting them to say the name, like calling all angels, so that they connect to that angelic support and protection around them as they prepare and rest for sleep.
Mm. Yeah, I always remember her mentioning and how that formula was created, right? And there's another combination that they have called Guardian. And I think one of the important issues with kids is feeling safe. That can also be an issue around sleep or other situations in which they feel unsafe. So the combination Guardian is a very special one. It has yarrow, it has a few other essences that are really protective. So it's really a go-to formula as well. And we do have aspen in the Bach remedy system that can be very helpful also for fears of the dark and fear of going to sleep and all of that. And the last one, generic, that I want to mention is easy learning. And that will take us into the questions, but we'll take some of your questions first. Easy learning is one of the combinations created by the Alaskan Essences for learning issues in general, for doing homework, for the whole process of, concentration, organized mind, being present. That is such a helpful combination as well. And the mindful in the FES remedies. But let's see what questions those present here have, and then we can intermingle with the questions we received previously. Yeah.
So anyone who has a question, go ahead and go to reactions, put your hand up, and I would love to call you in. And be brave. Somebody else has the same question. They're hoping somebody else will ask it. So I'll have a question in the chat. Paula C is asking, can anyone recommend essences for children who cannot have alcohol-based essences? This would definitely be a good question to ask. Thank you for asking that. And talking a little bit about how we use essences with the littles. Ruth?
Yeah, and the kindergarten is glycerin based. There's always just a very, very small amounts of alcohol from the preservation of the mother essence and the stock essence. But the conservation of the combination, the preservative use is glycerin. And very often that's what we use in our practice as well when we're preparing for children. So that's really easy. Just buy vegetable glycerin that's organic and that's actually edible. And that will do. You usually have to use a larger amount than you would use of an alcohol preservative. And it doesn't last so long. It's a little sticky and it's sweet. and children like it. Yeah.
Yeah, generally speaking, I'll preserve a bottle with at least a third glycerin to water, and I'll go up to a half, kind of depending. Half the time it's because if it's during the winter time, it's so cold in the room where I store it. It's hard to pour in.
Mhm.
But I would like to talk about how we can use it. So for oral ingestion, using glycerin, I think is, absolutely the way to go. But for the real littles, like your granddaughter, and for very, very young children, making a spray is a really excellent way, because just putting it on their skin or spraying it way up and over the top and letting it drift down onto them is all they need. So you can definitely use topical and or mist versions, and for them to have a little bit of alcohol in there for the preservative is not going to be or it shouldn't theoretically be a concern for they're not taking in alcohol, right? So yeah.
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 Yes,
And
Deborah.
hmm, oops, hold on, Deborah, sorry, you're muted.
I always used vegetable glycerin with parents of children who didn't want alcohol. And what happened is and you want to taste when you put the glycerin in, it's like a quarter of glycerin and the rest of water, or a third. It gets really sweet, so you can go down to a quarter. And what would happen if I wasn't really clear to them is that um, the tongue would end up getting on the dropper, and because it wasn't alcohol. So, and then they would start to say, "Oh, it tastes funny." So I knew it went off. So what I did is that when I gave parents a bottle that had glycerin in it, I would tell them to say to the child, "Open your mouth, baby bird." And so the child would lean back, and then I would teach the parent to hold the dropper way up so that the glycerin, the dropper would never touch the tongue. So that open the mouth, baby bird was really good to get the child to put the neck all the way back so they didn't get their tongue on the dropper. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would suggest, even when you're preparing with glycerin for internal use, do what FES is doing, prepare it in a spray bottle, because then you avoid that issue. Yeah.
I'll often another option for that is to have them put it on a spoon. Put the drops on a spoon, and the child can take the spoon. Sometimes that works as well. So lots of options. Thank you for bringing up the don't touch the dropper with your mouth, please. Really good point. Thanks, Deborah.
More
Hang on,
questions?
Adele.
Is there an alternative to glycerin for children? Because I had a teen who was doing her exams, and she was avoiding taking it because it was so sweet and it reminded her of some type of a medicine. Is there like I use brandy, or I use the plant glycerin. But I was trying to think of an alternative to. Now, I did suggest that for the rest of her exams to just spray it into like a cordial, like try and get it into her. Because she said, I know it's only I know there's nothing that it doesn't work, but it's working for me, but I don't know why. She couldn't explain why it was working, but it's
So
it's
let me say what my experience is. I have not routinely used glycerin when preparing essences for kids. I just use the brandy, and I don't think that's a big of a problem. The Italians give, sips of their wine to the kids since they're little. I don't have a prejudice around that. I don't think they become alcoholics just from very diluted preservative alcohol in the bottles, but that's me. Okay, so other people may have a problem with this, and then they can use only glycerin, and I don't know of any alternatives.
yeah, okay.
Do
Because
you?
Discussing it with the parents is always a good way to go. If the teen is fine with having the alcohol preservative, I don't think it's a big deal either. But there's additional options, right? You can bottle it with alcohol and under a spray cap and tell her to use it topically. You could
Yeah.
bottle it with alcohol and put it and have her put it in water and dilute it. You could do the same thing with glycerin. If she doesn't like glycerin right out of the bottle, and I don't like it either, honestly, put it in water and slosh it around, and then it won't be such a big deal. So always working with them to figure out like what is the way you're gonna really like taking it. Some people do use vinegar as a preservative. I don't think that's any more acceptable to a young person, but maybe, I don't know,
No.
depends on the
No.
individual. Does that help?
But all the teens that were doing their yeah, that's great. All the teens were doing their exams had rescue remedy in their bags, but because there was alcohol in it, they were not allowed to bring it into the exam with them. But she was allowed to bring mine in because it had glycerin. So
Oh.
it just shows that the teens are going for the rescue remedy as
Well,
a
I would say just make it with water, but tell
yeah.
them
Okay.
to keep it in the fridge at home and then throw it away after a week. So that if there's a problem of not being allowed to bring it in, make it in pure water. Yeah.
Exactly.
Great.
And
Thank
leave
you.
it a shiner. Don't put a label on it.
Yeah.
It's just do whatever you got to do in
Just
order to make it
water.
work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
In a spray. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mary.
I quite frequently work with middle school people, and yes, the ones that are my grandchildren, and I have a real comfort zone is but sometimes they're friends and that kind of thing. But they're not allowed, at least in Michigan, to take anything ingestible into the school. The sprays are sometimes problematic as well, and I've used a lotion and let them build an aromatherapy, because none of them have run into a problem with hand lotion in the classroom. And the middle school kids, I like to be able to give them the opportunity to self-administer before an exam or anxiety producing kind of things. And during the pandemic, I was able to find all kinds of little bottles of hand sanitizer, and nobody cared if they used hand sanitizer. And it's totally bacteria free.
Great that you brought that up, because this is what my friend in Brazil, Rosana, who has been working with autistic kids, that often there's a problem in having them ingest stuff as well. But also the whole thing of big social groups and all of that. And they adopted hand sanitizer gel, like a gel in a pump bottle, and put the essences there. So that has been a solution that has worked. So I'm so glad you reminded me of that, because that's such a perfect medium for today,
Yeah. And even just, if they're allowed to take a water bottle with them, dose the water bottle, boom, problem solved. Also,
Absolutely.
roll-ons. Think about a roll-on. You can just make up a dosage bottle in a roll-on, and they could use it topically. It's another possibility. So this is fun, having lots of options. Thank you, Mary. And Lauren.
Well, I think all my suggestions have been just taken, which I've done all of the above with kids in schools, and yeah, definitely putting it in water bottles and like everything you've just said are great ways in schools, and just having kids just bringing them in that way. The other thing is with little kids, and I actually had an herbalist teach me this way of you can put drops on your little kind of right here, and pretend to be a cat, and you just lick it off your hand that way. And kids, I mean, anything that is fun, they love it so much. So that's another great way to keep it so it's not touching them, and they get to take it. And yeah, I mean, just being really playful, I think, and imaginative. There's so many ways. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. And I can't resist but showing just how much they love it, because I have this that happened just now, my little granddaughter, and look at how she loves it. and we'll replay this, and prepares with her eyes half closed to receive the spray. It's the most lovely scene. Anyway. And she waits for it. And my daughter says, I keep it by her bed. And, she kind of makes that gesture, give me, please.
That's so sweet.
Yeah, Louise.
Oops.
You may
There
unmute
you
it,
are.
Louise.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what about the frequency within a day's time for children? Does it change?
In my experience, yes. Usually what I've kind of in a standard way said to parents, especially of small children, children don't need a whole lot. And, 2 to 3 times a day is absolutely enough. Yeah. And often they don't need the essences for very long periods of time, but it all depends on the issue and how long it's been going on. Like, for instance, I remember early in my work having this boy that came to me, and he was 8 years old, and his dad had died many years before. And he still had that grief that had never really been properly processed and cleared. So I gave him golden ear drops, along with perhaps some other essences. And he was just so happy that he could have something, because he was crying as if it had just happened. And so in this case, he would probably need to take that essence for a little longer. Yeah, so Pushpa.
Hang on just a sec here.
I just noticed someone in the chat asked about the rescue remedy pastilles. And when my daughter was in elementary school going into middle school, and I really didn't know much about flower essences at the time, and I tried the rescue remedy pastilles with her, and it was like I was always running out to buy more. She used them like, I want to say like candy, but that's not true. She wasn't really a candy eater, but she relied on them. And we tried, I was looking at all kinds of things about what might be going on, that she was experiencing this intense anxiety. And it really, I wouldn't say that they ever relieved her anxiety, but not like what I would have hoped for, but they somehow got her through. It got the edge off. So that actually for her worked somewhat anyway. So anyway, somebody had asked a question about that. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's all whatever we can all try what we can try, and whatever might work. And I guess if you're really creative, you might be able to make your own with all the essences that you might need. But candy making is beyond my abilities. Did we have, let's see, I could scan through the chat. There was a question from Carol about the same number of drops as adults. And she lists the different recommendations by the bottles. I think these are all very flexible numbers. I don't think that like X number of drops is important. It's more how regularly you offer it. And go back to Dr. Bach's thing about like how many drops to use in a dosage bottle, 2 drops in case the first one misses. So it's all, I don't think that you need to be worried about counting exact numbers. Did that help answer the question?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Yeah. And also FES never recommended that I know of 7 drops. So that's probably Australian bush. FES, it's usually been 4 drops 4 times a day. The standard just has the Bach remedies, but from the stock 2 drops. But I totally agree with what Kathleen said and what Steve Johnson always used to say. 2 drops just in case one of them misses.
Did I get that from Steve? In my head, I got that from a Bach quote, but okay, all right, it was Steve then.
Steve that used to say that. Yeah,
that's sweet.
Yeah, there was one question that was sent to us about anxiety, specifically anticipatory anxiety.
Before we
not
get
knowing
into the
what's
essences,
coming.
can I answer Eloise's question real quick? She asked about
Yes, please.
the number of essences within a blend, because we're still in the same area. Do you want to tackle that, or do you want me?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that Deborah asked me to bring up, the work that my friend Rosanna has been doing in Brazil with the autistic kids. And there's actually a course that she's going to teach. It's in Portuguese, unfortunately, on the 29th. I'm going to attend to see if I can bring more of her wisdom on this to our communities here. So she has been working over the last several years with autistic kids at different stages, like early diagnosed, really little ones to adults, and throughout the whole range. She has been working with groups. She has been working in these organizations that receive the parents and the families and the autistic kids. And the formulas she makes have many essences. There's really no limit as to the number of essences. It seems, and that's always been one of the ways that I see this. Some people might disagree, but my sense is that when you're dealing with individuals that are very resonant, that are very sensitive, what you don't put in the combination will be felt. Its absence will be felt. So for this reason, I usually add to the formula what's needed, and I don't get too concerned about the number, but more about really attending to the needs. So this is my advice, and I think when there is clarity, when there is coherence in a formula, when you put together something that really meets and resonates the need of the client, you're doing a service, you're really helping them. What you want is to have that resonance. So perhaps, there will be other teachers who will answer this question differently, but that is my answer.
I'm always really attentive to using essences that have really gentle qualities rather than ones that are more activating or, potentially like, dredging up shadowy stuff. Or so I'm always just thinking along the lines of what sorts of essences I'm using, the character, the essential character of the essences being, more along the line of gentleness. But it's really interesting, the work that Rosanna's been doing. When I saw those formulas, I was like, wow, that's way more than I ever would have thought. But isn't it cool? Like, we're all experimenting and seeing what works, and she's been doing some really great research. So I can't wait to hear more.
Yeah, and one of the things that we have is that sometimes when you are working with challenging issues, you can have essences that play a support role in the formula, in also stabilizing the processes. But those are, longer conversations about combinations. So shall we go into those questions,
Yes.
Kathleen? Yeah.
I think that would be really great.
And if you have further questions around combinations, you can for children specifically, which is the topic of today, you can ask. So for that question about anticipatory anxiety, I would think of Krawe from the Bush Essences. That's a really good one. Depending on the situation, I mean, aspen is an essence for fear of the unknown. So that is kind of a classic essence for these issues. I thought of Jacob's Ladder from the Alaskan Essences because that's one for people who already want to know everything that's going to happen. And there's that difficulty in surrendering and letting the higher design take the lead because they can't really have control and figure out everything. So those are the ones that came to me. Another question, and I'll go to
Can I
other,
bump one more
please
piece
do.
into that?
Yes, yes.
You know, when I see that anticipatory anxiety, what I'm hearing is that it's really scary to be out of control. You know, in a circumstance that I'm a new circumstance, I feel like I don't have any control. And that always makes me think of Mimulus, because that image of Mimulus going right up against the water, all the water, you know, thrashing it around, and it can like break off and then plant itself somewhere else, or the little seed can go watering downstream and pop up somewhere else. Mimulus has this just flexibility and ability to tolerate and be courageous and like, yep, don't know what's going to happen, but let's give her a shot anyways.
Such a great essence for kids, right? There was another question about perfectionism and nervous about failing at something. Of course, you know, large comes to mind immediately. That's an essence that we use a lot with kids, especially when they have performance anxiety, let's say, that kind of thing. The bush essences have bush fuchsia, which is a really good essence for performance as well. And it's an essence that they give for speakers, and it's an essence for learning. So it's a really interesting one for this kind of situation. And there are others that we can think, but I just don't want this to be, you know, a talk about lists of essences that one can use, but just thinking along these lines, you know, large, feeling confident that you can do it, and also respect your own timing. Yeah, we have other questions, but let's see if the live audience has a few others. Yes, Pushpa.
What you were just talking about an essence for like speaking or making a presentation or something like that. So do you, I think this applies not just to kids, but in general, but do you use single essences like that for a specific thing in addition to the kind of what I would call a constitutional essence?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. Yeah, absolutely. And oftentimes when there is a specific situation that they're going to go through, we would choose one single essence for that and have them try that and see how it works and observe. Yeah. So for instance, let's say a kid is going to have to present on stage, you know, and then you know, there's all of, so maybe you will use either larch or maybe sunflower, you're going to shine, or whatever else. Golden yarrow, for instance, could be a great essence for someone who has this apprehension around the exposure that they're going to go through. And golden yarrow is just the perfect choice for that as a single essence. Yeah.
Did I answer your question, Pushpa? Okay. Thank you. Thanks for coming forward. Appreciate it.
Another question we had that I think is, another question we had that I think is just such a relevant one that we will use all the time is supporting feeling worthy, boosting self-esteem. And we mentioned before the buttercup. And I will add to that sunflower and perhaps the whole group dynamic we can talk about, but maybe Kathleen wants to talk about buttercup a bit.
Oh, sure, absolutely. I love buttercup. Self-esteem is so much about comparing, and like this other kid has it so much, it's so much cooler, and everybody likes them more than me. Buttercup comes up in so many different formulas, for adults and for kids, of course. The one that was popping to my mind, is pink monkey flower, because it's so sweet in that you feel like you can show up as yourself, without being afraid of being judged or shamed, or because so much of that fear of putting yourself out there is fear of mortifying yourself, and everybody pointing and laughing, and horrible things could ensue from that. There's so many good essences for this, but that's certainly one I think of a lot.
And that is such an important one, because we see so many adults that had they had pink monkey flower at that time in their lives, they wouldn't have carried that wound and all the consequences that overlaid on that to when we get to meet them as adults. So pink monkey
That is
flower.
the great privilege of working with young people, is that you get to help them before it's turned into a lifelong challenge. It can actually just be turned around. It's really sweet.
And fast too, because it doesn't get ingrained so deeply, even if it has affected them quite a bit. Yeah.
And then one of the next questions that we had received, by email, so thank you very much for putting in your questions, was about how you feel about your body. With the time of puberty and massive physical changes can really spark a lot of challenges and difficulties. So we have some possibilities in here. Manzanita is a really good option, for helping to appreciate your body, helping to appreciate and nourish your body, because the constriction around food and all the potentials for that are Manzanita is our go-to for that.
Yeah, and it addresses the question in the chat about eating disorders, because manzanita is one of the main ones that we think about. It has a lot to do with acceptance of one's physicality and the fact that we live in an organic body that connects with the earth, and that, it's like Kathleen talks so beautifully about this botanical family and how these plants have a whole connection with the network in the ground, in the soil. And so manzanita is a beautiful one for accepting one's physicality and knowing that we have to nourish our bodies and that we're going to be healthy if we have well-nourished bodies. But of course, there's pretty face as well, because on this whole comparison thing, but I have a little tummy and she doesn't, or my nose is not as perfect as the nose of my friend, or I'm heavier than all my other colleagues, so this should be a really bad thing. And yeah, so pretty face is so helpful for bringing out that sense of inner beauty.
And it is so challenging with young people comparing themselves to, the Instagram and the just the constant visual images they receive of these. They're not even real people. They've been photoshopped and adjusted and filtered, and so comparing yourself against that is guaranteed to cause some problems. So thanks for bringing in pretty face. Such an important essence for appreciating yourself for who you are and what you can do, and that you are unique. Yay. Not look like everyone else. Yay.
Yeah, and goldenrod, that is one of the FES essences. It is in the sunflower family, but it's like a stalk full of tiny sunflowers all together. And it is the essence for when you want to fit in and you want to be like the group and this whole thing of peer pressure. And it's one that's very helpful when it's good for you to know you can be yourself and it's okay and you belong by being yourself and by trusting that you can be just who you are. It's one that we use so much, especially with teenagers.
And that bridges really nicely with the loneliness question of feeling alone and feeling not accepted in whatever groups you happen to be in. It's so important to support that ability to feel connected without turning yourself into something that you're not. And that goldenrod is so valuable in that way. And now my mind is blanking. I had one in mind and then now it's completely
Single delight.
yeah. Sorry, I just lost my train of thought there of what essence we're talking about. But yeah, that's such an important essence for helping you shine out and others recognize and see your shiny self rather than some illusion. Yeah.
Yeah, and there were questions about teething and all these different transitions. We just taught a whole class about walnut, and walnut will be like the Swiss Army knife, of the flower essences when it comes to transitions of every kind. So the walnut bark remedy is a big multi-use one.
And that session was part of the Bach flower in contemporary practice course that we just completed that final last one of. So those of you, if you were part of that or interested in that, check out. That's the second iteration of Bach flowers in contemporary practice.
Yeah, and it's one that those who were part highly recommend, right? So it's really so good that we were able to do this deep dive in each one of them.
And we have a question about a 4-year-old who's a little hyper and very demanding, but still happy and adorable. That sounds like Heather to me. Heather is for that sort of performative attention seeking, that hyper, as you describe it, sounds a little bit like, look at me, look at me, look at me, look at me, just really wanting to have that gaze. And Heather is so helpful for just helping you just settle into yourself, not need extra attention because you feel like you have enough. I think the Heather state is just a terror of not enough attention, not enough love, not enough everything. Heather just settles that down now. Your people, they care about you. It's okay.
And I've used chicory in a very similar way as well. And thinking that it's that light blue daisy-like flower, that kind of neediness, even though you have so much already, right? And this ability to be satisfied with the level of attention that you do get and feel more plenty. Yeah.
Well, they're completely different plants, right? I mean, we're whole different plant families. They're coming at this polarity of love and acceptance and feeling like you have enough from two very different angles. So the heather's coming from the ericaceae angle, which is the rooted down nourishment, receiving enough love and attention, and the chicory is coming from the asteraceae, which is that integration of all that is you and being able to connect to others and be able to feel like there's enough for you, and then you can also open and share with others. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was looking at some questions and comments on the chat. I really don't think I would like to go there. They were talking about, issues of late teens and suicidal. I think this is not the right venue for us to discuss these themes of that level of depth and seriousness. This is kind of a light chat public chat that we're having. So let's keep that question for another situation in which we're in a course, we're looking at deeper levels of work. That's more appropriate. Yeah.
We can definitely talk about the sibling rivalry question, which is a great one to bring in as we're coming close to rounding up our thing. So if you have another question, be sure to pop it in now or put your hand up as we come towards the end of this session. Sibling rivalry, Holly. You know, there are a number of options, but boy, the go-to is Holly. Any sorts of vexations of the heart. I always remember that key phrase. And that's sibling rivalry for sure. What do you use, Ruth?
Holly. There's no other. The one and only. Yeah. So I would love to hear from people what is inspiring you about this question this conversation that we're having. What is inspiring you? What is awakening in you as far as inspiration and desire to be continuing to do this work? Who would like to bring their voice? Yes, Eloise.
I'm feeling lately like I could just have my hands full just creating essences for my family. And, with the one family on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, and all the grandchildren. So it has renewed my interest in thinking about, well, like, why am I doing it for everybody else and not my family? So, yeah.
Thank you for saying that, because that really is, that we can nurture them for their present and their future, just as we do with meals and food, right? Thank you.
In fact, if I could just add to that, this morning I was taking my grandson to school. He's 11, and we have to take a train and a bus. And I had my roll-on essences, and I was putting it on myself, and I said, do you want some? Can I put it on you? He was like, no, no. And I said, well, it really helps me feel better. You want to feel better? He's like, okay, here. So that was like his first time. So now we can like maybe create an essence for him if he wants to. We'll see.
And the roll-on is a great idea. I think I'm going to get some bottles of roll-on because I think it's just such a great way. Yeah.
It's very handy, and you can find it at the bottom of your purse pretty easily. So
right.
Thank you for getting him started. Good job,
Yes.
Eloise. And Lauren.
Well, I think I was just inspired by we were talking about the intergenerational part about just I don't know. I think just working with kids in general, there's just something about touching them at that early age and being able to really instill something in them, whether it's creativity or trust in themselves or all the different things that when you work with children that comes up. And I think also working in schools, I've just seen I've always had this vision. It's definitely ahead of where things are going to go, but I feel like just some of the problems, and even in very well resourced places, I just flower essences to me would just support in such, I don't want to say easy, but in some ways a really easy thing to implement. And I don't know, like at our school, we are very fortunate to have a nurse, a full-time nurse there. And that is the busiest place on campus. I see it. It's like kids go there for just attention, to get their cup of water, to get their graham cracker, to have the nurse say something kind to them, of course, to be attended to, but also like their little bag of ice, their baggie of ice. And I'm always like, oh my God, I wish they could just have flower essences in there, like some version of any of the creative ways we've talked about, whether it's like for older kids, go pick a card, oracle card with the flowers on it, whatever. So many ways. And anyway, it's my hope that at some point there'll be more room and space for those to be welcomed into schools, into wellness spaces. And I think teachers, anyway, this could be extrapolated out to anyone, not just working with kids, but I see it in particular. It just feels like there's so many possibilities of integration that
Yeah, and thank you so much, Lauren, because it depends on us as a community to gradually build that credibility of this work that will take it to this level. I just had a conversation with my friend Annette yesterday, and she's been working actively in along with like a whole network of flower essence practitioners that are supporting victims of this flood in the south of Brazil that was huge. I mean, it's just one of these enormous disasters that displaced a lot of people. And the government is actually incorporating the whole rescue work that the flower essence practitioners are helping, and there are volunteers from everywhere. And the whole thing is super organized, and so many people are being helped, including kids. And so, this work there is becoming mainstream as a result of the decades of work of so many serious practitioners and their dedication. And so we can do this. It's a matter of doing our daily work, and it will happen.
Thank you, everyone, for being here, being part of this, for being a caring heart that is working out in the world, and helping the little ones, and helping the other ones, and helping everyone. So thank you for being part of this. Thanks, Ruth, for bringing this inspired idea to us. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, everyone, for watching and for being part of bringing flowers into the world.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for opening your mics and saying bye. That's so sweet.
Thank you.
Mm.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
And Lauren, thank you so much for all you brought from your experience at the school. I'm really touched, so happy that you came. And Rosemary and Eloise, and all of you, looking forward to seeing more of your work with kids flourishing in the world.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.